Good morning and welcome. My name is Adam Block, and I call the meeting of the Council of Economic Advisors to order. This is Monday, May 24. We haven't met in a little while, so I'm glad that we're getting the band back together. We'll also talk later in our meeting for our next scheduled meeting as well. When I we'll take attendance. When I call your name, if you could say that you're present, that would be helpful. If you know a friend who may be a minute late. Is Kate here? Do you know Kate? Have you heard from Kate?
Kate, Jeremy, Heidi, and Dan are all excused. They all let me know.
They all
they all let me know.
Okay. So next was Heidi Bill Day. Okay. Bob here. Rick
here.
Mike Wilcox
here.
Excellent. Liz
here.
Excellent. Jeremy Halpert. Did you hear from Jeremy? Adam Meisner
Here.
Perfect. And then Matt Talcott
Present. Yep. Here.
Excellent. And from the town we have JP. He's already said
yes.
So
present.
Our manager of economic development, and also with us from the planning department, Lee Newman.
Hello.
Hello. Good. We can hear you. So I think, is there anyone else here that I have not recognized? We have 3 sets of minutes to approve. Minutes have been published. Any questions about the minutes? So we'll take them in not alphabetical, in chronological order.
Thank you. I probably do this one motion.
You're supposed to typically do one per. So can I have a motion to approve the minutes of November 15, 23, please?
So moved.
Can I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. I think we have to do, because we're hybrid, we have to do.
You have to do individual.
So when I call your name, please say aye. Bob.
Aye.
Rick.
Aye.
Mike.
Aye.
Liz.
Here. Aye.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then Adam.
Aye.
Matt.
Aye.
Brian.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. I don't know, Brian, if I called your name for the attendance, but for the record, we'll note that he's present and glowing as a ghost. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of June 15, 23?
So moved.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll come to the vote. Bob? Aye. Rick?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Liz? Liz?
She's muted.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Aye. I'll just
Thank
keep
you.
my audio on.
And Adam?
Aye.
And Matt?
Aye.
And Baran?
Aye.
Great. Motion carries. Finally, the minutes of June 23, 24. Can I have a motion to approve?
January, you mean?
January. Sorry, what did I say?
You said June.
I apologize. January.
At least you know I'm listening.
To 2024. Very good. Can I have a motion, please? I have a motion to approve.
So moved.
Thank you very much. We have a motion by Matt, a second.
Aye. I second.
You. And then any discussion? Hearing none, we'll come to the vote. Bob? Aye. Rick?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Liz?
Aye.
Adam?
Aye.
Matt?
Aye.
Ron?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. The motion carries. We've approved those minutes. Thank you all very much. The third item on our agenda are some updates in the planning and zoning. One of the things, Lee, I'll ask you to chat about is the parking study, but I know you've I know you have other things that you wanted to chat about too, so the floor is yours.
Oh, sure. Thank you very much. So I think that I wanted to cover a couple things. I wanted to give you guys an update on where we are with the MBTA Communities Act and the town's, moving that forward to a town meeting in the fall. So I think I understand that you all had a presentation on what the proposal is. So, but briefly, I think there are two options that are on the table. The town is required to produce 1,784 units under the zoning scheme. And they're moving forward with two options. One we call the base compliance plan, which is for a total of 1,868 units, that is what that zoning scheme is developing. And the other is for the neighborhood housing plan, and that provides for 3,294 units, which is at a higher density. So the overall density per unit is 18.6 units per acre under the base plan, and it's 35.6 units under the neighborhood plan. And so basically the zoning scheme calls for those two different options for town meeting to consider sequentially. First, the base plan, and then if that is adopted, to build on top of that with the neighborhood plan. So these plans have gone now to the state. They do a pre-review for us. We submitted it at the beginning of May. They let us know, they're going to let us know by August whether or not what we've provided is compliant and where we have to actually tinker with it, if that's required. It's also gone to the Attorney General's office that looks at it from a zoning perspective, which is just to make sure that in terms of the zoning language, in terms of how it's framed, it's actually going to generate these numbers of units as of right, and that there's nothing in your base zoning that's going to interfere with that process. So we expect to hear back actually from the AG sometime within the next week and a half. The schedule is for the planning board to finalize after they hear back from the AG and from the state to make any modifications that are required. And to revise the zoning and at the beginning of August, advertise it during that month, and then schedule it for hearings in September. And then the article would be voted on at the October special town meeting. So that's kind of where we are on the big planning effort that's been going on now for the last year and a half. We're getting closer to the finish line, so that's encouraging. So the other thing I just wanted to give you guys an update on was where some of the projects are that are going through the pipeline through the planning office. And so currently we had Blue on Highland in front of us. They're looking to expand their restaurant into the adjacent nail salon space. I think they're going to add an additional 40 seats to their current capacity of 137 seats. We had a noodle restaurant in front of us at the former Harvey's hardware store space, and they're looking for 31 seats. Sweet Basil was just in front of us to formalize their outdoor seating. They have 11 seats adjacent to the building and I think 28 seats in a parklet. And so that was basically approved at the last planning board meeting. And then there are two major projects that are kind of sitting out there that you're familiar with. One is the Muzzy site, the 465,000 square feet that we approved for office and lab. There's been no movement on that at all since we approved it. I think it's a market situation, and I think they're evaluating their options at the present time. The other recent approval was a medical office building. This is right across from the temple. It was a 50,000 square foot facility. And I anticipate that that's going to move forward, although we haven't seen their final plans yet. So that's kind of where.
Excuse me, Lee, where is that located again? The
It's
medical
across,
building?
it's those, I should have it exact, it's across from the temple. It's those 5 one-story buildings. They're all coming down.
And Highland Avenue, okay, that's.
Excuse me, on Highland Avenue. I'm sorry, I should have given you the street. Highland Avenue across from the temple. Yes. So the 5 buildings that are there that are all the 1 stories are coming down. It's going to be replaced with basically a 2-story building with parking underneath it for 250 cars. And so that was approved, and I anticipate that will probably be moving forward sometime this year. And of course, Children's Hospital over in the New England Business Center is under construction. So I think that's kind of Adam, you're part of the planning board. Let me know if I've left a project off, but I think I've covered the ones that are most significant.
Lee, can I ask one more question?
Sure.
The single story buildings that you're talking about are Simon and Sons, but does it also include?
No. So Simon & Son, this is on a site a little farther east where Kennedy Brothers used to be.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Where, what used to be, Adam? Sorry?
Kennedy Brothers. So yeah,
Oh.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
you said the single story
I
building.
know.
That's not a single story building, the one that you're talking about.
Well,
Where Kennedy Brothers is.
So that, but right. I think so. There are 5 buildings.
Right.
I think they are like 2 stories. One of them may be 3. I can't remember.
Right.
It's just before, it's on Highland between Arbor Way and is it
It's
Cross?
right after Salad, whatever.
Yeah, it's just yes, exactly.
Right after that.
Just Salad, and then it's before the condos, the townhomes on the opposite side. And they participated in the hearing process because there is concern about when the commercial properties were occupied, that there were all kinds of delivery trucks and other customers and patients and so on going to the different offices that would actually cut through what amounted to their driveway.
Yeah.
And to access the individual townhouse unit. So they expressed some concern about that.
Isn't there also a contractor yard at the back of those properties?
I think
Yes.
that's true, but that's not this property, right, Lee?
No, that wasn't part of this property, but there is a contractor's yard behind this site. You're right.
Yeah, and that's accessed, I think, off Arbor Way at the very end.
Yeah.
Sorry, Adam, can I ask one more question? I apologize.
Yeah.
What are we, just from a economic standpoint, besides the obvious of having a children's hospital building in Needham, which is great, what kind of economic impact do we plan to see from that building? Is there any tax implications? Because I know there are hospitals, so I can't imagine.
I believe they're paying it. There's a payment in lieu of taxes. It's a pilot program, Lee. Is that correct?
That's correct. There was at the time that the zoning was put in, at the time that the zoning was done, there was an agreement with the hospital through a payment in lieu, and the zoning was done conditioned upon all that being in place.
Okay, so again, I apologize, but what kind of a payment? Is it a one-time payment? Is it annual?
It's an annual payment.
And just out of curiosity, what are they paying in?
I don't have that at the top of my head, and
okay.
I didn't negotiate that. That was all done through the select board.
Got it. Okay, we'll get some info.
They're paying what other commercial property payers would pay on the site, and they're not paying the personal property taxes.
Got
it. And then I can't remember how many employees or how many beds the hospital had, but there'll be obviously, it's not like an emergency facility. It's I think outpatient surgery for the most part, with children's orthopedics, among some other practices. So that may expand medical and lab interest within the New England Business Park in a tight area, perhaps. And then also more employees hopefully may get in the business park, may hopefully transfer to some of the retail and restaurants, in the downtown and in the Heights. So there'll be additional ancillary, economic benefit through, by having more jobs in town.
I think it's a great addition to Needham, especially for a lot of us who use children's to go into town, and if we can get services here, it's huge. And like you said, of course, employment and all the benefits of using local businesses, it's awesome. I just wonder, at some point, do we reach out to children's and have a list of small businesses and have some sort of a welcoming package for them and saying, hey, listen, if you use some of these places, these are the places that are available for restaurants, whatever else, for their employees, might be a good way to reach out to them when they first open or have some sort of a grand opening party.
Thank you very much. Lee, one of the other things that the CA have been talking about in particular in dealing with the downtown, but also in the Heights and some other parts of town, was the impact of parking, and that parking had been, we waive a lot of parking because the parking bylaw is out of touch with either the supply of parking or the demand for parking, in fact. And the town, I think, had engaged, I think Amy was involved in this, in Stantec produced, and I think we looked at it and there was a presentation made to the CEA about their conclusion, and they studied just parking in the Heights, and they made, I think, 13 recommendations or something, and also parking in the downtown. Can you explain to us where we are to complete the whole parking picture and when you expect that will be complete?
Okay, so essentially, I think Adam's right. There was this one study that was done by Stantec, and I think there's a desire to actually review the entire parking bylaw across all of the districts and make amendments to our current parking framework to reflect, current recommendations that are coming out of ITE. And so we needed some additional monies to actually pay a consultant to assist us with all that. And we just got the appropriation from town meeting for $80,000 in planning funds for that purpose. Although I just found out last week that there's a potential grant out there that would cover the cost for this planning work. And so we're currently evaluating, and that application is due the beginning of July. So we're currently evaluating whether or not we want to go after that, because it would basically enable us to use our planning funds for other purposes, the town meeting appropriation, if we can get a grant to cover this. So the plan would be to actually hire a consultant that would assist the planning board in evaluating the parking demands across all zoning districts. That work would probably happen in the fall. And so we would be looking at changes either at a spring or a fall town meeting in 2025 to actually implement it.
Thank you very much. And what other economic activity or permits do you anticipate in the commercial sector or large scale multifamily over the course of the next year, over the course of this year?
So on the multifamily side, I mean, I think Wingate is actually going forward with their proposal to convert their skilled nursing facility at the intersection of Highland and Gold into apartment housing, and to put an extra story on that building. And that should move forward sometime. That's going to actually probably move forward sometime within the next 3 or 4 months, the implementation of that project. I think probably the most significant redevelopment proposal will be looking at the redevelopment of the Carter building, which has now been vacant. And under the MBTA zoning, there's a framework to allow that to be converted into multifamily housing as of right. The planning board just had a meeting with the representatives of that property and the ownership of that property to look at actually increasing the FAR that was proposed under the MBTA Communities Act to a higher number to enable them to actually maximize the build out at that site. And so the planning board is considering whether or not it wants to modify the MBTA draft zoning for that purpose. So I'd say the Carter building is probably the big Carter building, which is right in Avery Square, is the big project that will probably come out of the MBTA Communities Act, and you'll see an implementation on that.
And do you anticipate other permits in the other business districts for commercial and mixed use?
I'm not aware of anything that's actually close to permitting currently.
Okay. While we're chatting about these districts, have you heard from any landlord that has expressed some, concern or looking for relief? I know that in the business, the New England Business Center, vacancy rates, I think, have been rising. And some landlords, I think, are maybe, concerned about that. And has anyone reached out to you looking for relief of any kind, or either from a zoning point of view or for any specific conditions?
Nothing comes immediately to mind.
And then is Mike Wilcox here?
Yep.
So Mike, while we have Lee, one of the items in our agenda was access to the business park through First Avenue. And you had some concerns about that. Do you want to should we take that item up now while we have Lee? And
That'd be great. Yeah. So as many of you know, Acapulco's closed a number of years ago. There was a proposal to do a Century Bank and some sort of adventure center. I think it was skydiving or something that sort of went away when the pandemic hit. And then for an extended period of time, maybe till like the last few months, it was being used sort of a lay down construction area for the Highland Ave, Needham Street DOT project. So that's all been cleared out, but it's basically the entrance to the park, and flanking that on the opposite side. Many of you probably also aware that Mighty Subs left last summer after many years there. So the entry to the park, and it's been mentioned to me on various tenants that have looked at space at some of our projects about what's going on there. And I know there's two different owners, looking for retail tenants that physically could create a better sort of gateway, if you will, if projects went forward, and B, could create some much needed amenities as well. So that's the one issue. The other issue is as you move down the street, the building on First Ave, the Restaurant Depot building, we owned 50 Cabot, and we sold it, and the new owners there, I think, had some back and forth, and maybe Lee, you're aware if it kind of came through permitting, but the trucks are going in on Cabot, and because of the 18-wheelers, they're basically going onto their property. So they came up with an agreement to do a new access road around front, and you have all these loading docks that look out on First Ave. As you might expect, they did a whole buffer or a line of evergreen type trees. A good number of them have died, so they were dead for an extended period of time, and then more recently it was sort of cut down. So again, as you get into the park, your impressions about the park itself are formed by these properties that are strategically located near the entry, at least on the Highland Ave side versus the new Kendrick Street. So suggestion is maybe at a future meeting we bring in those two landlords representatives and see what we can do to help. I know speaking on the Acapulco site, they were concerned about the fact that if you're coming out of Newton towards the highway, that new configuration of First Ave that allowed people to leave on First Ave does not allow you to take a left-hand turn in. So you'd have to kind of know where to go to get off at the Panera Staples intersection and work your way around if you're coming in that direction. And then Lee, I don't know whether there was any permitting that was done with that work that was done at Restaurant Depot, but maybe if there's a way to sort of get them back, looking at enhancing that area. You got some living trees and you got some gaps that you see right into basically loading docks. So those are my two concerns about the entry port.
Well, in terms of Restaurant Depots, I'll take a look at the permit. I mean, generally our permits have conditions that the landscaping has to be maintained. I mean, so when it dies, it's supposed to be replaced. And if that hasn't happened, that could be a violation of the underlying permit. So I'll take a look at the permit.
Yeah, and I don't know what permitting they did. Again, I just know it was a big concern of the new owners.
No, there was permitting at that site, and there was a requirement for that buffer along the street. That was all looked at the time they came in with those loading docks. So I'll pull the permit. And if there was landscaping that was required, then it's supposed to be maintained.
Yeah, I sent a photo to JP. You can pass that along.
I can forward that on the lead. That was my same question, is if it's on the original site plan, they have to maintain that, so.
Yes, and there's generally a condition in there that speaks to that. There's generally a condition in our permits that specifically speaks to that maintenance responsibility, which is what I'll take a look at. And I'll send you a copy of the decision, JP.
Okay.
And then,
Forward that on.
Adam or Rick or Bob, I'm putting you on the spot here, but have either of you heard of any interest for redevelopment of the Acapulco site? Or have there been other challenges to that particular site that's inhibiting its redevelopment?
I haven't heard anything.
Go ahead, Adam.
I haven't heard anything about it. It looks like they're still marketing it, but let me see actually.
Probably
I
marketing.
emailed the broker a while ago, and it and I think it was just fully available still. I'll look up the email real quick.
I just assumed it was tied up as that laydown site, so I thought it was
Right.
I figured it was just kind of out of commission for a while.
Right. Mike, were you gonna say something a second ago?
I was just saying that the Colliers on the opposite side has a leasing sign up for the Mighty Sub space.
Yes.
And I believe they were doing some maybe white boxing of the space or some improvements to maybe make it more presentable for leasing, because I saw construction there, and I think JP, you said that nothing's.
Yeah, I checked with Joe, and they had just a white box permit. They were just kind of cleaning it up and getting that white box ready for another tenant to go in.
But not a specific.
Not a specific tenant, just white boxing it up and.
Yeah. Got it. Okay, so you'll look into that, and I guess bring it to the planning board if there is a violation.
Yes.
And then at our next, if we can do that for the planning board's next meeting.
I can also follow up with the building commissioner, who would be the enforcement person under the permit anyway. So I will take a look at it.
According to CoStar, that Acapulco site is still, its proposed property, 8,500 square feet, and they're proposing 3 different units of 2,500 and then 2 3,000 square foot units. Occupancy April 2025, but I don't know if they're going to hit that at this point. So, but it looks like it's fully available.
And there is that marketed as office or retail?
Retail.
Right, makes sense. Okay. So that's good feedback, Mike, into the business park that was one of the entrances. We wanted to have an improved look as you're trying to lease out space, and other landlords in the New England Business Center are trying to lease up space. And as we talk about leasing, Adam, do you want to kick us off and let us know how the office and lab market is doing generally, and how you're finding Needham in comparison to the 128 belt in that sector or segment?
Sure. Mike's probably better one to ask about the lab market. I know Paul Finch owns a lot of buildings that can accommodate that. Most of what I'm focused on right now is office, which is, it's fine. I wouldn't say it's much different than it was, call it 12 months ago. We're seeing mostly renewals happening. Really haven't seen in the last, call it 12 months or so, that many companies just giving up their space, even though a lot of those leases that were signed in, call it 2019 on 5-year leases that are coming due. I think it's, a lot of those people have stabilized and figured out, to some extent, how to get enough employees to come back in to justify keeping the space. Tour activity, it's comes in waves. Like last week was really quiet. 2 weeks ago and 3 weeks ago was really busy. I think this week is probably going to be a little busier than last week. We've been doing some leases. I mean, we just signed a lease at 175 Highland for a financial services group for about 3,000 feet. I mean, there's a lot of like smaller tenants running around Needham from what we see, or Newton and Needham, I should say. But for the most part, there's still plenty keeping us busy. And then, yeah, like some groups are actually taking more space, which is great, obviously. Some of those is part of acquisitions from larger companies that really want to beef up an office. So working on a few of those right now. We do a lot now in Wellesley because Jumbo Capital bought 7 or 8 buildings from Haynes Management, and pretty much every single one of the tenants, I think we've done probably 10 renewals in the last, call it 2 or 3 months or so, and a couple of new deals, and they haven't lost any tenants, just to other buildings or giving up their space. So I'd say that's pretty healthy. And also I should add, like, they've been pushing rents there as well, from call it the low 30s to the mid to upper 30s a square foot in Wellesley. I mean, Haynes typically doesn't put a lot of money into their buildings, common areas, and Jumbo runs a very different operation and is spending money there. And I think the tenants are welcoming it, and aren't looking to leave. It's an upgrade. I mean, it's going to cost them more, but I think most of them understand that they've been paying below market for many years now. So,
Adam, are there considering the fact that they are able to grow rents, are there accommodations being made by the landlord on a lot of these renewals? Free rent or a refurbishing package of tenant improvements or anything like that to keep the tenants going? That's one question. The other question is on these renewals. Are there a number of tenants that are requesting less space because of this post-pandemic, not wanting to return to office?
Yeah, so on the first question, I mean, pretty much like most of the leases that we've done, the renewals are 3 years. And you're seeing like 1, maybe 2 months of free rent. And then that, kind of depends on also if tenants want any upgrades done to their space. I mean, nobody's doing anything really significant aside from like paint and carpet, just to modernize it. I mean, for those, Haynes really offers like chocolate and vanilla on their carpet. So every office basically looks the same throughout their whole portfolio, and Jumbo does it a little different, give plenty of options and everything. So people are allowed to, create more of an identity in their space. So we're seeing some people that want to do it, and some people that have been in those spaces for like 20 years and just don't want to deal with moving all their furniture around. So yeah, there are some accommodations there. And then the second question was not really on downsizing. I mean, we have a couple of groups in their portfolio that have asked actually for more space.
That's a good sign.
Yeah.
I mean, there's one CPA practice that's downsizing a little bit, but another tenant in the building wants the downsized space because they're growing. So they're just plugging that hole there. But for the most part, nobody's looking to give up space.
I think that's actually different than what we were looking at a year ago, where there were more companies that were giving up some of their space. They didn't have as much demand for. So it sounds like the office market on the 128 belt has, from your point of view, has stabilized.
I would say for the smaller to mid-sized tenants, the larger tenants though, those occupying 50, 75, 100,000 square feet. There's a lot less of them out there in the market right now. And those are the ones that have shed space and continue to shed space. Although you have, some groups moving to the area. What is it? Welch's, that's moving to Waltham there, out of Concord, which is nice to see. But there's not a lot of, big tenants running around at this point. You're just trying to give back space within their current building, if possible.
Adam, it seems like a year ago, people were still trying to figure out, landlords are still, and companies are still trying to figure out the impact of post-COVID, not wanting to go back to the office, working from home. But as we've seen, I think in the news, there are a lot of companies now that are saying, okay, the party's over. We're demanding that you come back to the office at least 3 days a week. And maybe we're returning to some sort of pre-pandemic normalcy in the office market. So,
I wonder if that's true downtown too. Because I thought downtown, you're going to be dealing with those large, 100, 200, 300,000 square foot office holders, and they have been concerned not just in Boston, but in other major centers. Where, other, retailers were concerned because office employees weren't going back. Their businesses were struggling, restaurants were struggling in the downtown. Did I interrupt you, Adam? Cut you off?
No. I was just gonna say, like, the further we get a lot away from about the end of COVID, I think the more, the less people are gonna be giving up their space and, taking more space, and people are more accepting, I think, of coming back to the office, maybe not 5 days, but 3 days a week. I think it's going to be a long, long time before we get anywhere close to where we were in occupancy rates pre-COVID. But it's heading in the right direction, at least, out in the suburbs. I don't really follow downtown as much. And I certainly don't listen to the media because it's, they're painting a picture like the whole office market is dead, where, that's more the case from what I understand downtown than out in the suburbs here. So it's a conversation I constantly have to have with tenants out in this market, that it's really not terrible if you're in the, call it, 2,000 to 15,000 square foot range. So.
And Mike, what's it like from your vantage point?
Well, statistically, it's not great right now. We're part of the Mass Pike market, which has a 25% vacancy rate right now. And if you look in the park, the Mass Pike market is about 20 million square feet, of which 5 million is available, 3 is direct, and 2 million is sublease space. If you look at the Needham Crossing area, it's just over 2 million square feet, and it has a 16% vacancy rate for direct space, and then a 17% vacancy rate for sublease space. And the major contributors of that are TripAdvisor, IDG. We have a tenant at 254 Second, Brigham and Women's, who has 50,000 square feet, and they're not coming back. So while the numbers aren't great there, for the landlords, the good news is a lot of these tenants are locked into long-term leases. But real estate is sort of a backward-looking, indicator. You can't transact on less space, more space, what have you, until your lease is up. And a lot of our tenants, are still struggling a little bit. I see, a number of requests to go short-term while they're still trying to figure it out. Some are downsizing. We have a tenant, 117 Kendrick, that is part of a larger company that has space in Boston, and they want the people to, eventually look at merging them all in. And, the people in the suburbs say, hell no, we're not going into Boston. So you still have that back and forth. The lab market continues to struggle. There isn't a lot of suburban demand. There's a deal in Watertown that's about to be signed, which is good news for the market. But out in Waltham, they have buildings up that basically are still struggling to find tenants. At the Muzzy site, we're trying to be as creative as possible in terms of just pivoting. We have some buildings like 117 Kendrick and 254 Second, which are older buildings. They used to be the Polaroid warehouse. So it's got great clear height. If you can bring in power, you can attract more of these clean technology companies, green companies, tough tech they call them. So we're looking at a number of those type of users. Our market hasn't had a lot of that in it because there isn't a lot of that product, like maybe north of Boston, whatnot, that supports those that infrastructure, if you will. So I mean, it's still a market in flux as we see it. One other thing I'll note is Digital Realty is looking to sell their building on Cabot Road, the newer building, that basically is a data center. The data market in this area hasn't been great, largely due, I think, in part to energy costs. So we took a look at that and we tried to think, okay, what else can you do with it, and that's, again, part of the challenge of a lot of the lab owners is like, once you have a building built for a purpose, in the case of the the Digital Realty building, they don't have a lot of parking to go with it either, because there's never intent to have people park there. How do you flex? How do you find a you know, a new use. And we haven't had a lot of transactions in the suburbs. Maybe Adam is aware more, but you know, there's certainly some notable ones in Boston that have sold for, you know, half of what they were, you know, basically paid for, you know, within, you know, 5 years or so of these transactions. So the market has dramatically shifted in terms of valuation. So I know, Lee, you probably don't see it, but I don't know if the tax assessor sees abatements, you know, for some of these properties, in terms of owners looking to, you know, essentially get a lower tax basis based upon occupancy.
Yeah, I don't see it. But that would be happening through the assessor's office.
I mean, one
So-
final, if I can add just quickly, you know, we're hamstrung a bit too for certain medical uses in the park based upon the new zoning, for TripAdvisor. You know, as many of you know, Children's has had a friendly sort of permitting of their building, but it's not allowed by right. So you have to get a special permit, and it's some, you know, group practices are generally allowed, the smaller, you know, doc organizations, but larger medical users are prohibited under the zoning, which is very complicated to begin with. But you couldn't bring in a major institution or even an affiliate of them if they had a group that wanted to do imaging or, you know, whatever kind of specialty, and they're part of a larger organization like, you know, Brigham and Women's, Mass General, even Dana-Farber, I assume, would be prohibited just based upon the definition of their medical use, medical ownership, if you will.
Hey, Mike, can I ask a question on something you mentioned earlier? When you first started, you're talking about Needham Crossing, that the vacancy rate was 16%, and that the sublease was 17%. Are those additive as far as availability?
Yeah, there's a 33% factor, but if you look at IDG, you look at TripAdvisor, those are on long-term leases. So I think, you know, a lot of larger users are just, well, Trip is restructured. IDG, I'm not sure what but they put all their space out and see what they can find, kind of thing. So it certainly doesn't help statistically, but
Yeah.
as I said, they're on leases.
Yeah.
And it's almost 10%, it's 8% above, you know, above the sector. So it's a real struggle. So Lee, like Rick is talking about here and Mike is talking about it sounds like, you know, the New England Business Center is substantially underperforming the market, which itself is depressed at a significant level. And we're hearing, you know, a large landlord identifying constricting market or market constraints that are, you know, I think inhibiting growth or even just not growth, but reducing some of that vacancy. So, you know, we should consider looking at, you know, medical uses in a way that I know that there is, you know, we have the, you know, Beth Israel, you know, and I think with children, there have been some exceptions in some limited ways. And yet maybe we should consider some other ways of potentially opening up, you know, medical uses in a way that wouldn't adversely impact, you know, the hospital, which is important for me because, you know, as a type 1 diabetic, I'm part of their Joslin facility. You know, I'm mindful of the different competing factors, but it is something that I think the market is clearly telling us that we need to be mindful of. So I appreciate, Mike, you bringing that up, and it's something that we'll have to, you know, to look at. That's a dramatic 33% vacancy combined is pretty dramatic for the business park.
Adam, I just want to, I've got another meeting, so I'm going to have to jump off of this one. Is there anything else that you'd like me to address while I'm here?
Thanks for raising that. I think we're good for now. we'll reach back out for the next meeting, but thank you very much for your help.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee.
Thanks, Lee.
Um,
Rick, you know, talking about that, I mean, I can envision that whole area being like a new Longwood almost
right,
with, you know, the specialty cancer and
Right,
so on
right.
and so forth. But, you know, that presents other problems from a zoning standpoint. You know, we have height restrictions, parking requirements
Right.
for medical versus other uses. So it would take some planning.
yes, which is, you know, something that we'll have to, I think, Mike, if there are some, you know, specific ideas that you have in mind and you want to raise it to this, you know, to this CEA, you know, then we can make a recommendation to the select board that they refer this to the planning board, you know, to look at. So we'll, you know, unless.
Yeah, I mean, just by example, we have the one group that doesn't qualify. So, you know, imagine you say to a tenant, we want to do a deal with you, you want to do a deal with us, but we've got to go to town meeting, which happens, you know, once, maybe twice a year, and get special permit approval for your use. I mean, to me, the solution is we need to change the zoning. You know, the tech market is really what's dragging things down. Who knows when that comes back, but the lab market is not what it was. We just need the ability to, you know, have a more diverse tenant base that we can attract. And if we're excluded from certain ones, it just, you know, I think it's going to hurt us in the long run. And I understand, you know, there are reasons for Beth Israel that this was done, you know, when that zoning was put in place, but you know, I don't know if things have changed a little in terms of the perspective on how important that is to keep that in place, but it certainly would give us a high degree, more flexibility in terms of who we can attract.
I remember going through on the planning board a change in definition in dealing with what would enable the children's hospital to come in. And maybe it wasn't a direct competitor to BI, but there is a history in the zoning of how medical uses are defined. And that does relate to the town hospital, which predated the Grover, which predated the, you know, when BI took it over. So it would be worthwhile, I guess, to, you know, to have a conversation and, you know, maybe JP, you and I would have a conversation with Lee, understand that history, and then, you know, see what kind of opportunities there are, because it sounds like that type of zoning relief for uses may, you know, benefit to turn the market around. I wanted to turn to you, Rick, to talk a little bit about the industrial sector. Do you have an idea of how the industrial segment's doing?
Not doing as well. It's like every other sector, in my opinion. It's been a little overbuilt.
Yeah.
And because of all the costs involved, cost of land, cost of getting it permitted, cost of actually building the property, everyone is going. Anyone who was building warehouse was going after the Amazon model. You know, they want to build 300,000 square feet, 30-foot clear. In our portfolio, my Fulcrum Real Estate Partners, my company, we try to go more towards smaller industrial properties, because the bigger behemoths that they're building right now, because they need to, in order to make the economics work, can't accommodate the under 10,000 square foot user. The electrical supply or the HVAC's supply company that has a counter that contractors come in and you know, want to pick up. They can't accommodate those. They can't break the building down to a smaller size because of the size of the overall building. So unfortunately, because of the cost of land in the area, you can't build those more flexible, smaller industrial buildings. the economics just don't work.
So does that,
You need a lot of square footage to spread those costs over.
right, so does that make the value of the 50,000 square foot existing buildings higher?
Could, yes. Yeah. Because like I said, those people who need 10,000 square feet or under
Exactly,
have no place to go.
right,
They need clear height, they need a loading dock, they need an entrance,
right.
but they can't break down a 300,000 square foot
No, no, no.
industrial building to accommodate that.
10,000 square foot, that's right. And is there, have you seen a change in demand for those smaller users or mid-sized users that may take up 5,000 or 15?
Yeah, I think the vacancy rate for those types of buildings is lower, considerably lower than it is for some of the larger who are looking to get one or two big tenants.
Right,
You know, there's a lot more smaller tenants that need the smaller space than there are the bigger tenants that need
right,
the big space.
that's good, that's helpful insight.
That's my opinion anyway. If you guys, Adam, or if any of you guys have a different opinion.
Bob, I was gonna pick on you for a minute.
Sure.
And see what observations you have from the retail segment. Are you noticing any changes in the market?
No, you know, steady as she goes on the retail side. You know, we don't have a ton of retail property anyway, so we're
Right.
probably not a really good bellwether.
Barometer?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I will say on the office side, you know, most of our portfolio is office, and things have been generally good. I'd say I pretty much echo everything that Mike and Adam have said. We've seen more activity. Some of it is external, which is good. We've had several cases of growth in place, which is great to see.
Tenants renewing, that kind of thing?
Renewing and expanding, yeah. And generally, I would say most activity is healthcare related, either hard science or the soft sciences, like for instance, in-home healthcare providers. We've got a couple of those folks who are doing really, really well. In fact, one tenant told me it's mainly because of all the immigrants coming into the area. They're staffing these these immigrant shelters. So you know, it's a form of growth, I guess, right?
Interesting.
But yeah, you know, it kind of comes in fits and starts, and we've had a pretty good run recently. We don't have a ton of large tenants like Mike is experiencing in the industrial park, and I guess the one large tenant we had, which was part of a large healthcare network in the area, did vacate as a due to consolidation. So our biggest slug of space is actually available right now. So it's kind of seeing it on both ends right now. And what I do think is probably a permanent fatality of COVID is the really small spaces are not that marketable anymore. Those are the guys who figured out they can work from home. You know, they don't need an office necessarily.
So are you talking about less than 1,000 square feet?
Yeah, like those really small ones. And we didn't have a ton of them, but what we did have, you know, kind of just dried up and blew away.
So are you combining a couple of those spaces to make and market 2,000 or 2,500 square foot spaces? Yeah,
it's the employees that have staff that need a place to bring people. And I mean, and we haven't seen really, there's no long-term effect of remote working, you know. I mean, that didn't really affect any of our tenants significantly at all. I would say the long term, I mean, it was more of a commuting pandemic than it was a COVID pandemic, you know. I think there's no that's the real structural problem that needs to be addressed, is for the downtowns to get healthy. Right, it's just commuting, it's just unsustainable. But yeah, so largely things have been well.
Good.
If I can add to the discussion about the industrial market, the discussion has no effect on Needham, basically. The industrial market is being developed in places where land is a little bit cheaper.
Yeah.
You're seeing it west, 495 and further west. You're seeing it in established industrial parks, south, Stoughton, Taunton, areas like that that are already well-established big industrial markets.
Right.
The land here is too scarce. You don't have sites big enough, and they're way too expensive to be able to make the numbers work.
That makes sense. And there are, I mean, it's funny because the market has, you know, all kinds of different segments. We've had industrial districts here, there are commercial districts here, some mixed use districts, obviously residential districts too. So but I think you're right, over time, there are still some industrial areas like off West Street. And then kind of off Highland Avenue.
You do it electronics.
Exactly.
You know, that obviously was in the news recently in that area. We looked at the board here at that area a while back when Deborah was still on the town economic development. And it's just such a crazy area because the lots are so small. It would really benefit from some sort of consolidation where you could, you know, do things that, you know, in a bigger scale. It's got great visibility, which drives a lot of users' decision making, but it's just a challenging area. And I just have to say, I have to go to an appointment. I'm gonna pick it up in the car, so I'm just gonna drop off and come back on it.
Okay, thank you very much.
It's interesting. It's interesting actually what Mike said, because I remember the conversations about several things you guys were talking about, like the medical and the business center. I think part of it was perhaps at one point we were talking about just it couldn't be overnight stays. Could just be day stays. So some stuff discussed around sleep type businesses and stuff. The area that Mike was just talking about, didn't we rezone it to allow for some housing back there? We were trying to get some stuff around the water, or am I misremembering that?
So when we were first looking at Highway Commercial 1, Highway Commercial 2, and Highway Commercial 3 in the different areas, residential was, I don't think it was a component, but then I think the planning board, when Highway Commercial 1 advanced and passed a town meeting, it did include some multifamily residential. Wasn't really seen as a focus for that area. And it's interesting because the Kendrick and Charles River Landing, like the underlying zoning, even by special permit, doesn't itself allow for residential. And they came in through 40B projects. And you know, the question is, you know, should that, you know, be modified? And it's certainly something that, you know, we should probably talk about. I also, because we already have now 2 large users, we know that housing is in huge demand. And when I look across the Highland Avenue and we have access to the Charles River, I would love to tap into and redevelop. Like we had students, I think, that came in from BU that looked at a project, which I love so much. I, you know, talked about it when I ran for the election on the planning board, to be able to unlock that the Charles River from Highland Avenue all the way to Central Avenue, and to include mixed use that would allow housing, multifamily, hundreds of units of housing, in addition to office and some ancillary retail with some public amenity space. You know, and to rezone in that way. There is allowance for mixed use 128, that whole area, but I think that we should reconsider, you know, the zoning and what are the changes that are necessary in zoning that would by the dimensional regulations that would spur the turnover in this consolidation of enable the consolidation of the lots, because that's been the biggest problem that we've heard, or one of the problems that we've heard, right?
Yeah, no, you're right, Adam. Bob may remember too. We were, at some point, there was some discussion about like, wouldn't it be nice to have some cafes and housing along the river, like you
Yes,
said, because on the Newton side, if you just go over the water, you got all the housing in the Newton side,
yes.
that's right there. And then the consolidation was the issue, like you said. There was some discussion about if you ever get some of these larger hospitals over, they might actually fund to try and get the Green Line over there as well, because it would
Right.
their Longwood hospitals to their Needham campuses and stuff. So it might be time to again start thinking about some of that, especially with the UG Electronics property. I know you mentioned it and we all read about it. I don't know what the plans are for that, but if there is no plans yet for it, it would be interesting to see, is there something bigger we could start envisioning?
So let's put that on our agenda for the next meeting. That's really helpful. Matt, with your client groups, are you seeing any changes in the real estate market?
I think it's more to what, I forget if it was Adam or who said it, or somebody said it earlier, like the strong encouragement to get people back in offices is happening now. Before it was a little bit, it would be nice for you to come in. Now it's pretty much like you really should come in at least 3 days a week. You're seeing more businesses that are saying, it's okay to be hybrid, but when times get tougher, it will be better for you to be in the office if we have to do cuts. Stuff like that, you're starting to hear more of that throughout different businesses that I see out there, at least. And just the general trend that you see, that you've read in the newspaper about downtown areas trying to figure out, what's the pivot that they're going to have from perhaps some more commercial type uses to multi-uses, housing and so forth. You're hearing more of that. It's hard because you got to redo buildings that are difficult to get redone, but you are hearing more about that as well.
Thank you.
Yep, sure.
That's really helpful. On our agenda, the next item on our agenda is a proposal for some possible changes to the Needham line for the commuter rail, which were in our packet. The select board is holding a meeting, public hearing, I believe, on tomorrow night, Tuesday night, the 25th, to reconsider, in an effort to try and reduce some of the train noise while the quiet zone is underway, to shift the trains to modify the service so that the weekdays, the 5:05 train from Needham would depart from the junction, I guess instead of the Heights, is that right? Mm-hmm. And the 12:13 outbound from Boston would end at the junction. And then on weekends, the 6:10 train from Needham would depart from the junction, and the 10:15 train from Boston outbound from South Station would end at the junction as opposed to at the Heights. So it would shift. And I think by shifting to the junction, and I don't know if they idle the trains.
Yeah, there's some idling more that happens. Yeah.
So then because they're not crossing so many crossovers, that it would reduce some of the required horns.
Yeah.
So
I know I live on Manning Street.
Yes.
Approximately a half a mile from the Needham Heights, and we hear that midnight whistle.
Yeah. We live near the junction, and I hear the late night, and I hear early morning. Sometimes it's 4:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
We'll hear them as they're moving around. And if you're like up to go to the bathroom, sometimes I can't go back to sleep as a result of it, right? Just because I just get restful, and then I hear the train noise now while I'm up. Anyway, so does anyone have any comment on the proposed change?
I mean, my comment would be, so I'm assuming the law says they have to, no matter what, when they do crossings, they have to blow the horn regardless of the time of the day.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. So that's the law. So take that as the law. I mean, it seems to make sense to me. What I don't know is I'm not one of those people that takes that super early or super late train. So just for us to be conscious of those people that may take it and that walk to the station from in the Heights or in the center, that will now have to drive a car, pay for parking and stuff. If that audience is minimal or none, then it seems like a no-brainer. If that audience is large, which I have no idea, then it seems like hopefully they're getting input from that audience as well.
Yeah.
So
I agree with what Pat said.
I actually, when it came up on the Needham Facebook page, that's one of the questions that I asked, like, how many people are we talking about that are gonna be displaced as opposed to the benefit? So maybe JP, that would be helpful. Are you attending that meeting?
Yes, I'm Miles at that meeting. So yes, I'll be attending the meeting.
So it would be helpful to be able to report in at our next
Yeah.
meeting, what?
And I was actually going to, I was away this weekend, but I actually want to come down and watch, especially my concern is from the late trains, how many workers may be taking that in back and forth? And if they leave their job in the town in Needham Heights, if they work at a restaurant or something like that, or need to going back into Boston, how is that going to impact them? Because that's their only mode of transportation for some of them. And I know,
I think a lot of it revolves around the times we're talking about. How many people are coming in at midnight and getting off
Right.
at the Heights?
I
And
think
how
it'd
many
be
people are taking the 5 o'clock
Train into Boston.
right.
I think it'd be the reverse though. At night, how many people work in town and maybe like work at a restaurant or a building and then are taking that back into Boston at the end of their shift?
Right. So
Also just out of curiosity, I mean, how many people have that option if they're staying late in town for a specific social event or what have you? They have the option to take the train rather than an Uber. So what might that, especially on Fridays and Saturdays? I mean, I don't think they run Saturdays, but Thursdays and Fridays would be something to think about too.
And again, to me, I probably would be one who would want to use the late night train for a special event or something like that. But to me, it really revolves around how many people
the numbers
are using it.
Exactly.
Because I think the number of people affected by the sound of the horns, whether they're elderly or they have small children or whatever, and it wakes them up, to me, that would be the deciding factor. Right. Not if there's less than 5 or 6 people or 10 people that are taking that train, I don't know.
Yeah,
just from a different perspective, I actually rented a house when
Lise has her hand up, so I'm going to come back to you in a second.
Sure.
Sorry, but just hold that thought. Lise, you had your hand up.
I actually thought that it was an incredible compromise. When I've lived in Needham for years, and I have heard about this group, the Quiet Group, forever. And I really thought they were just beating their head against the wall. And the fact that they got them to really look at that plan and study it and come up with a compromise, I think is just a great way. And I have to believe they've already gotten those numbers from, those trains. Yes. And I've ridden out of Boston. It ends early and there's like nobody on the train, and they don't collect the money, and you have your money ready and they're like, oh, never mind. And so I think it's a really interesting dynamic to take a look at. And the other thing that really stuck out, I think it was Peter O'Neill's article in the Needham Observer, was that the trains are running earlier and later than pre-pandemic. I'm not sure if I read that right, but that really struck me, that we came back earlier and later. And I don't know if the ridership came with it. So I have to believe they did some of the study already. So I was encouraged. It seems like a really great compromise to me. And I find the train soothing. I don't live far from the junction or Needham Heights. I'm kind of in between. Doesn't really faze me, but I can understand if you're right by the tracks. It must.
So this is a different thing from the quiet zone. This is what's in our packet. I think the select board is looking at as a potential interim solution while the quiet zone proposal, which passed at town meeting for funding, gets implemented.
Right, because it's not completely quiet, but I feel like it does take out half the town from hearing those horns.
But
So-
only, like, this is like an interim,
Yeah.
potential interim
Yeah.
solution.
Correct.
While the quiet zone work gets done, and this is outside of that quiet zone.
Okay. Still
so-
think it'll make those people happier.
Yes.
Right.
Again, I think, like, to Rick's point, it's gonna come down probably to the numbers, how many people are affected one way or the other. And, you know, and, JP, if you could track that and then report in on it at our next one, that would be helpful.
And I agree with you. I think the MBTA, I don't know who said it. I think the MBTA probably knows how many people's riding that train to determine if it's going to have a big impact on their revenue.
So, the next item on our agenda is the Doing Business in Needham guide. So how long has this guide been in existence for?
This one Amy started to work on.
Oh, great. Okay.
And I've kind of in the process of updating it. There's another section that is really, I've been trying to find something like Amy of like what other communities had and trying to kind of build something so that you can hand in. It's like, if you do this business, this is kind of the processes that you follow with some, there's a little chart that shows you which department you need to go to, showing, but also trying to keep it as concise as possible, because the last thing you want to do is hand somebody a 150-page document and say, congratulations, you want to open up a business in town, this is what you have to deal with, even though a majority of it isn't going to apply because it's very specific, you know, what page the business is on. So if you have any comments or
It's daunting, you know.
So this is.
I'm a tenant, I might say, can I walk on hot coals instead?
Yeah, exactly.
It's
This would
gonna be
be
easier.
somewhere else.
Right. So I think, what I'd probably recommend is let's, just given it, you know, the hour, let's everyone take a look at this and then provide some feedback. We'll discuss it at our next meeting. It would be good by the end of the year, or, you know, before the end of the year, if we had this as, you know, a physical document, but also, and more importantly, as part of a digital document that, you know, that can be sent out to all of the brokers that transact and need them, and for you and for government.
and maybe it just becomes more of a page on the website where rather than being a packet, it's individual links to specific things where people can click on and work their way through it. So it's not as daunting as this. And I can do it this way if you guys just want to make comments on it, or I can put it up as like a shared file where people can make notes in real time. You just have to make sure you register so I know who's making the notes.
I think that may get a little more complicated. So I would say send it out again to the whole CEA.
Okay.
And say, you know, please provide comments, either to you directly or to, you know, we'll discuss it at our next, meeting. And
I'll send it out in a Word document too.
And please, and then put it up on our agenda for the next meeting. Brian, your hand is up.
Yes. I just have to leave, so I just wanted to say thank you, and we'll connect soon.
Thank you very much.
All right,
Good
take
to
care.
see you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
So unless anyone else has anything, should we take a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We have a motion by Bob, a second by
Rick.
Rick. And any discussion? Hearing none, I'll come to the vote. Bob?
Aye.
Rick?
Aye.
Lise?
Aye.
Adam?
Aye.
Mike Wilcox?
Aye.
Matt Alcoff?
Aye.
I think that's everybody. The chair votes aye. We are adjourned. Thank you all very much. I think this was good and productive, and I look forward to continuing. Thank you.
Good to see everybody. Have a great one.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care. Have a good summer.
Too.
Yeah, in August.